If you have ever paid your credit card in full, on time, with zero interest and zero late fees, and then watched your score fall anyway, I want you to understand something very clearly. The system is not glitching. It is doing exactly what it was built to do. That is why this frustrates so many people. They think they are being judged on whether they paid responsibly. In part, they are, but they are also being judged on what the credit bureaus were shown before the payment ever happened. That is the real trap. And until you understand that one timing detail, you can keep doing what feels responsible and still let your score get dragged around by a number you never meant to display. So let me strip this all the way down. Most people think the process works like this. You use the card, the bill comes. You pay it, the bureaus see you paid it, your score reflects that clean behavior. That sounds reasonable. It is not how it usually works. In the real system, your card issuer usually reports account information on a monthly cycle. And for many issuers, the balance reported is the statement balance, or a balance captured around the statement closing date. Experian says most issuers report at the end of each billing cycle, and it explicitly notes that paying in full by the due date can still leave you with a high reported utilization if the statement balance was high. Now think about what that means. The snapshot often happens before your due date, so you can have a high balance reported, paid off completely, and still spend the next month wearing the credit score consequences of a number that no longer exists in your checking account. That is why people feel like the system is rigged. It is not really rigged. It is delayed. And delayed systems punish people who do not understand timing. Now let us talk about why that one number matters so much. FICO makes it very clear that amounts owed is roughly 30% of a typical score, and revolving utilization sits inside that bucket. So this is not some tiny side issue. This is one of the largest moving parts in the entire scoring model. And the damage is not only about your overall utilization across all cards, it can also come from what is happening on a single card. Experian says both your overall ratio and the utilization on individual cards can matter, which is why maxing out one smaller limit card can still hurt you even if your total available credit looks healthy in the aggregate. That is the part many people never hear clearly enough. They think, I have plenty of available credit overall, so one card being high should not matter. But scoring models do not only look at the household average. I have also looked at specific problem signals. A single overused card can look like strain even when the wider picture is less dramatic. That is why the strategy here is not just keep total utilization low. It is keep the reported number low where the camera is actually pointed. Now let us come to the day that really matters. Not your due date, your statement closing date, or the date your issuer captures and reports that monthly balance. That is the day controlling what much of the scoring system sees. If you wait until the due date to pay, you may be behaving perfectly from an interest perspective and still be behaving poorly from a reporting perspective. Those are two different games. And once you understand that, you stop acting like the score should automatically reward paying in full at the due date. Sometimes it will not, because the bureau's already got the photo. This is the easiest way to think about it. The statement closing date is the photo day. The due date is just the day the restaurant expects to be paid. Those are not the same thing. And if you want the score to improve, you must manage the photo, not merely settle the check. That is the whole secret. Now, let me say something else, because people swing from one misunderstanding into another. Once they learn that lower reported utilization is good, they assume zero must be perfect. Not necessarily. Experian has been very clear that low utilization is great, ideally under 10%. And that 0% is not inherently better than very low usage. People with the highest scores tend to live in the single digits, not necessarily at zero. That is why the old all zero except one approach became so popular. The idea is simple. Report zero on most cards. Let one card report a very small balance, then pay that small balance by the due date, so you still pay no interest. Experian has explicitly discussed that some people use an ASIO approach to manage multiple credit cards. Now, I do not want to turn that into superstition. This is where people become silly. They hear 1% rule and start worshiping an exact number as though one extra dollar is the difference between genius and ruin. Remember, the spirit of the idea matters more than the mythology. What you want is very low reported utilization, especially on the card that will show activity, while avoiding the appearance that you never use credit at all. That is the real principle: single-digit utilization, consistent on-time payment, low reported balances. That is the winning pattern. Now let us talk about how to actually do this in real life. First, find the closing date for every card you use. Not the due date, the closing date. That may take a little digging because issuers tend to advertise the due date loudly and leave the statement timing buried in the details. But if you want to control the score, this is the date that matters more. Second, set a reminder a few days before that closing date, not on the day itself, before it, because payments need time to post and a strategy that only works if your timing is perfect is not a strategy I trust. Third, decide what you want the card to report. If you are aiming for a very low number, pay it down before the statement closes so that the issuer reports a low balance, not the larger working balance you carried during the month. Fourth, pay the remaining statement balance by the due date so no interest is charged. This is important. A small reported balance is not the same thing as carrying a balance and paying interest. You are not financing your score. You are timing the report. That distinction matters. Now, I also want to say something about automation because people assume autopay solves this. It solves one problem. It helps you avoid late payments. That is extremely important. Late payments are catastrophic compared with utilization swings. Payment history is the biggest category in the scoring model. So yes, autopay is useful, but autopay by itself does not usually solve the reporting timing issue because it is generally built around the due date, not the statement closing optimization strategy. That is why a person can have autopay set up correctly and still report ugly utilization every month. They solved lateness. They did not solve the photo. Those are different problems. Now let us talk about what happens once people learn all this. Usually, they make one of two mistakes. The first is they get obsessed and start micromanaging every card down to the last penny every month, turning credit management into a religion. The second is they think the strategy means they can spend recklessly and just paper over it with timing. Both are foolish. This strategy is not there to rescue bad habits. It is there to prevent responsible habits from being reported in a way that looks less responsible than they really are. That is a very different thing. And there is another nuance here that matters. The credit scoring world is changing slowly. FICO Score 10T uses trended data, which means it considers how balances behave across a longer period rather than pretending every month is an isolated snapshot. FICO says FICO 10T is built with trended credit data, and its mortgage materials describe using about 24 months of historical behavior. That matters because it means the future of credit scoring may care more about balanced behavior over time and less about one clean monthly photo. But we are not fully living in that future yet. A lot of mainstream lending still leans on older scoring families and older reporting habits, and even where newer models are being adopted, the core lesson remains useful. Your credit profile is not only about whether you pay it, it is also about how your use of credit appears when it is reported. That is why this timing strategy still matters. Now let me tell you what I think the real lesson is, because it is bigger than credit cards. The financial system is full of places where being responsible is not enough. You also have to understand the reporting, you have to understand the structure, you have to understand what the algorithm actually sees. That is why two people can behave almost the same way financially and get very different outcomes. One person understands the mechanism, the other only understands the intention, and the mechanism always wins. That is the lesson here. Not that banks have some magical loophole, not that the game is hopelessly corrupt, that if you do not know when the scorecard is being updated, you can lose points while feeling completely innocent. And once you do know, the fix is not heroic. It is timing very low balances before the statement closes, a small reported balance rather than a large one. Full payment by the due date, repeat month after month. That is how you turn the system from something that surprises you into something you actually control. And once you control the photo, your score starts looking much more like the borrower you already were.